I've listened to over 5,000 hours of Jordan Peterson, and in that time, he has dropped some absolute gems on relationships and dating. So in this video, I'm going to break down to you his 5 best lessons that could change your relationships and possibly change your life. So number 1, you should date your wife or partner. This one might sound obvious, and in the honeymoon period, you're on it, you're doing adventurous things, you're having a great time together, you're going to new places and doing all this new stuff. But what eventually happens, you start to get lazy, and the relationship, it starts to become more stale, especially as you've moved out of that honeymoon period and you've been together a while. You're not doing anything new or adventurous. And this is the biggest pitfall of relationships, where no one ever brings their best to them anymore. In order to maintain a happy relationship, I've found personally, like date night is absolutely essential. Otherwise, you become what I call like a homogenous blob of a couple, where you're kind of just like the same person. You're not doing anything exciting. And just the sheer entropy and decay of the relationship will mean it'll fall apart. And I know this is difficult. Like, we all want to be lazy and just sit there and watch Netflix and just watch the new Stranger Things season on repeat and just not really do that much. But if you want to have that happy relationship, finding a way to date your partner the same way you did when it began is essential. Number 2, conflict is necessary. So, Jordan Peterson introduced me to this study. I think it's one of the most impactful I've ever seen, and it was done by Dr. John Gottman. And what they did is they got couples and put them into a sort of they called it the love lab, and they watched the interactions between them in what was a sort of make-believe day-to-day scenario. And they measured the interactions and how many of them were positive and how many of them were negative. And then 20 years on, they followed up with these couples and found how many of them were still together and how many of them were actually happily together. And what they found was, if a couple had more than 1 negative interaction per 5, they didn't survive. That couple broke up because it was just too much negative. There's too many arguments, there's too much conflict. And this kind of makes sense. But the one that blew me away was the fact that if couples have more than 11 interactions without having some form of conflict, those couples also didn't make it, because there was just too little challenge in the relationship. The people were not engaging in that dialogue that makes you better. The whole point of having that other person there is to try and challenge you to become the best version of yourself, as cliche as that sounds. So finding this out was massive for me. Someone definitely has that leaning towards being agreeable, that if you want to have healthy relationships, well, that requires that certain sort of pressure and conflict to deal with situations, which leads us into point number 3. Conflict and arguments, you shouldn't aim to win, you should aim to solve the problem. And that is it. When you are in an argument with someone, it can be real tempting to be a bit like, I'm right, you're bloody wrong, and I'm going to tell you why, and I'm going to crush you in this argument, and I'm going to feel really good. And the thing is, that's a real short-term win, because even if you are totally right and this other person is crushed, well, you don't get to leave. You still have to live with this person. You still have to be with this person. So do you really want to live with someone and be in a relationship with someone that just resents you? Because every time you get into an argument, you just play to win, when in reality, that's such a short-term mindset. Seeing the framework of an argument of, I'm engaging in this difficult discussion with you to try and solve this problem that's almost external to us both. And this is something that I've always tried to have as a mental framework for myself, of like, the relationship, it's something that exists outside of the two of us. It's this thing that we both contribute to. So when there's a problem, we're both working on it. It isn't that you're just an idiot and a hypocrite and I'm just going to destroy you in this argument, because that will never work. So finding a way that when you are in those difficult conflict, whilst necessary, but still conflict situations, seeing it as, we're here to solve a problem, I'm not here to defeat you. Number 4, that is, tell the truth. If you can have an honest relationship, it will be one of the most important and valuable assets you will have in your entire life. Living and being a normal functioning person is incredibly complicated, and having someone that can actually tell you the truth and show you things about yourself that you never would have found out is incredible. Like, identity is such a complex thing, and having that other person there that is going to constantly tell you the truth of what they think you're doing right, where you might be making mistakes, that is so valuable. And every time we try to engage in a relationship that's just full of lies and deceit, we miss out on the opportunity to get that. We don't really know who that other person is, and we don't even know who we are, because we've just constantly engaged in lies for so long that the relationship doesn't really exist. It's like a napkin flowing in the wind. It's got no firmness or no structure to it. So one of the most important things about a relationship is that ability to be honest, and that's inbuilt into our actions and our communication. And finally, number 5, and I think this leads on from the last again, is that men and women, they are your greatest allies. That for so long we used to see each other as our greatest allies against all the dark forces of nature and all the challenges that we had to face as people. We did it together as a team, but now, when we look out into the world, it just feels like everything's setting us up to see the other gender as enemies. So I love his message here, and it's something that I try to just share as much as possible, that we shouldn't be seeing each other combatively. It's that we were our greatest allies against all the problems. Like, tell me a person that doesn't have difficulties in their life that wouldn't be able to be made better by having someone else on their team that they're able to have, to be truthful with, to have that occasional conflict and that challenge to make them better. Returning to this view where seeing the opposite gender not as someone to be conquered or to be fought with, but to be someone who is our greatest ally. Those are the 5 lessons that I've learned from Jordan Peterson, and there are loads more, but I think they were the 5 most important that I've taken on board. And I think if you can start to engage in these 2, I know for certain that it will improve your relationships and potentially change your life.